Yo, what's up my friends? As you guys just saw, Mona's elemental burst can hit pretty damn hard. For this video, I'm going to be showcasing Mona on two different DPS builds. One build is going to be focused on really maximizing out her elemental burst damage, and for the other build, the majority of her damage is going to come from her normal and charged attacks. I will also be talking about her talents, constellations, artifacts, weapons, team comps, as well as breaking down her big burst combo. So guys, feel free to let me know in the comment section below which build you like better and which build is going to suit your playstyle more. With all that being said, smash that like button and let's get the showcase started. First of all guys, Mona is a character that can be built in so many different ways. With little amounts of resources, you can build her more support heavy where she can provide your team with crowd control as well as maximizing your main DPS's character's damage through elemental reactions and her elemental burst. Or the other hand is if you decide to invest in Mona, she can easily become one of the hardest hitting characters on your roster. She also has a taunt, a backwards leap, and a unique sprint that can help her maneuver around the battlefield with ease. However, on the other hand, if you are looking to play Mona as a DPS, she does require a team composition that really just revolves around her, or her damage is going to be quite mediocre. You're going to need to properly utilize elemental reactions, along with having an animal character on the team which can further reduce the enemy's elemental resistance. In comparison to the other 5-star characters, Mona actually has the second lowest amount of base HP, which means that she is incredibly squishy. So you better make sure that you have a team that can keep her alive through heals or shields, because if you don't, a few mistakes can easily lead to her death. She also requires Constellation 2 unlocked to really make the most of her normal attacks. And of course guys, this is pretty unrealistic for the majority of the player base. Either way, let's move on and take a look at her talents. Starting with her elemental skill, Mona's elemental skill is Reflection of Doom. This is a very unique ability. She is currently the second character in the game that has a taunt 3 when Ganyu comes out later this week. Her elemental skill when activated will create a water phantom that will continuously taunt nearby enemies. While taunting, the skill does hydro damage to nearby enemies. When the skill expires, the water phantom is going to explode and that's going to deal AoE hydro damage. Mona's elemental skill also has a second activation. If you hold down her E, she'll leap backwards before summoning the water phantom. Also, another thing to know, only one water phantom can exist at any time. Mona's elemental burst is Stellaris Phantasm. Guys, this elemental burst is absolutely insane. There's so many features to it and it can be used in so many different ways. First of all, I'll explain what her elemental burst does because of all the effects. It can be a little confusing. So when you first activate Mona's elemental burst, she is going to trap nearby enemies inside a bubble. This bubble will make enemies immobile. The bubble lasts for 8 seconds, so just from this alone, this makes it an awesome crowd control ability. However, there is also a second effect to this. When an enemy with a bubble takes damage, the bubble will explode causing hydro damage, but it will also leave behind something called an omen. This is also a debuff. This debuff will last for 4 seconds and it will increase all damage taken by enemies by 42%. Keep in mind that this is at talent level 1, and the best part is, if you level up the talent, everything about the burst gets stronger. You get more damage, longer debuffs. However, the cooldown and the energy cost of the talent does not change. This elemental burst also has one of the highest multipliers in this game. I would actually argue that Mona probably has the highest amount of burst damage, if she has the right party members on the team. As I had mentioned before, even if you don't have the resources to build Mona to level 80 or 90, you can just use her as a support just to help maximize the DPS of your other characters. For those wondering which talents you should level up, well, I highly suggest prioritizing her elemental burst first, and her elemental skill and normal hits are not really needed if you're playing Mona as like an elemental burst support. And for those who are focused on building Mona as their main DPS, then of course you would want to level up all 3 talents. Mona also has a very unique right click that no other characters in this game has. She can change herself into a puddle of water that allows her to consume stamina to move around quickly. The neat thing about this is that you can even use it on water, so instead of swimming, you can dash across the water instead, and when Mona comes out of the water, she's going to splash nearby enemies, applying wet status to them. Keep in mind that this doesn't do any damage. Mona's first passive talent is Come and Get Me Hag. What a name. So if Mona uses her right click for 2 seconds and there are enemies nearby, Mona will create a water phantom when she reappears. The phantom created from this only lasts for 2 seconds and the explosion damage is half of the original one. The passive is oftentimes not looked at, but this can be really good. It is a great way of initiating a fight and it will let you get into a better position. Not only that though, the taunt from the ability can get you out of some pretty sticky situations. Her next passive talent is Waterborne Destiny. Guys, this passive talent is pretty darn solid as well. This passive talent is going to convert 20% of Mona's energy recharge rate to pure hydro damage. Whenever Mona ascends, she does gain energy recharge, which in return is going to give you guys more hydro damage. And lastly, with her third passive talent, whenever you're crafting weapon ascension materials, she does have a 25% chance to refund a portion of the materials used. This is amazing because it is going to save you so much resources in the long run. It's definitely better than like Diluc's last passive talent where he gives you back ores whenever you're crafting a claymore, just because you craft weapon ascension materials a lot more than crafting weapons. If you guys have seen my other videos, you know I mostly base my 5-star character guides at C0, just because the majority of players in this game aren't going to be getting duplicate 5 stars. I got extremely lucky in getting C2 Mona, however my overall thoughts at the end of this video is going to be based on C0 Mona. And again, constellation for 5-star characters are an added perk, but 5-star characters without any constellations are phenomenal already. Either way, let's start with C1. So starting with C1 is going to enhance the effects of Hydro-related elemental reactions for 8 seconds for enemies who gets affected by an omen. So pretty much enemies that get debuffed from her elemental burst. So Electro Charged, Vaporize, Hydro Swirl, all those damage are going to be increased by 15%, and the frozen duration will be increased by 15%. C1 is going to allow Mona to give her party members more damage when she uses her elemental burst. C2 is the one that I had briefly mentioned earlier in the character intro, and this constellation really enhances the main DPS Mona build a lot more. When Mona's normal attacks hit, there's a 20% chance that the attack will be followed up by a charge attack, and this can occur once every 5 seconds. C3 is the standard stuff. This is going to increase the talent level. C4 is grade 2. Any characters that attack an enemy with the Omen status debuff is going to get their crit rate increased by 15%. And of course, C5 Mona's elemental skill is going to be increased by 3. And lastly, for C6, when Mona turns into that puddle of water from her Rake Lake, she is going to gain a 60% increase to the damage of her next charge attack per second of movement speed. This can stack up to 180%, and this effect will last no more than 8 seconds. Alright guys, let's move on to artifacts now. So there's 2 artifact builds that I'm going to show you, and the first set of artifacts is going to be a 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece of the new Hydro artifact set. This combination is going to maximize Mona's elemental burst damage if you're looking to use your Mona to one-shot bosses, or to just deal a ridiculous amount of burst damage. This is the artifact set that you want to go with. For main stats, you're looking for attack percentage on Sands, Hydro damage on Goblet, and crit damage on Circlet. Substats you're going to be prioritizing are crit rates, crit damage, elemental mastery, energy recharge, and then attack percentage. Another thing too, you can run elemental mastery on the Sands artifact spot, and that will actually give you the most damage out of her elemental burst when you pair it up with a vaporized reaction. Energy recharge is also going to be another great choice here just because of Mona's passive talent, but ultimately the main stat that you decide to go with on Sands should come down to the artifact substat roles as well as your playstyle. Elemental mastery will give you the most burst damage, attack percentage or energy recharge will give you more overall utility and more overall damage. An alternative to the 2-piece Hydro set is 2 pieces of the Wanderer's Troop for that juicy elemental mastery. Running this will give you the most damage out of Mona's elemental burst when she's utilizing a vaporized reaction. But the 2-piece Hydro set is what I prefer instead, just because it does provide more damage outside of those elemental bursts. And again, like I mentioned, I just have better artifacts for the new Hydro set instead of the Wanderer's Troop. The second build here is a full 4-piece of the new Hydro set. This build is going to be great if you want to use Mona as more of a main DPS character instead of like an elemental burst supports. The 4-piece effect of Heart of Death increases normal and charge attacks by 30% after using an elemental skill. Because Mona's elemental skill cooldown is 12 seconds, you can essentially have 100% uptime on that normal and charged attack damage buff. For main stats, you're looking at either attack percentage or energy recharge on Sands, Hydro damage of course on Goblet, crit rates or crit damage on Circlet. Again, for the Sand spot, I would make that choice based on the substats of the artifact that you have. Both main stats are going to be great here. For Circlet, I highly suggest that if you have around 40 to 50% crit rate, then you want to go with crit damage here. But if you're lacking crit rate, let's say you're around 15 to 20%, then I would suggest going for a crit rate Circlet instead. For Mona's elemental burst build, there's really only one clear winner, and that is the THICC. Because we're focused on prioritizing damage for Mona's elemental burst, we want to make sure that we have a weapon that gives crit damage as its main stat. The secondary effect from the weapon is incredible too. When the character is swapped into the field, there's 3 possible buffs that the character can get, but only one will be applied. From worst to best, it starts with 100% attack increase, 96% elemental damage increase, and then a whopping 480 elemental mastery increase. If you land on that second or third buff, that's really going to drastically increase Mona's elemental burst damage when she triggers a vaporized reaction. The Solar Pearl is also an alternative as well. However, if you have the THICC, you use it, and if you don't, well, Solar Pearl can be a decent choice, but it is not going to be better than the THICC, and here's why. For those that don't know about Mona's burst combo, this might not make a lot of sense to you now, but it will later. So to get that extra damage from the Solar Pearl, you need to land a normal hits. Once you land a normal hit, that starts a 6-second timer on that 20% elemental burst damage buff. From here, you will need to switch to an animal character to apply Swirl on the enemy, and then switch to Bennett for his elemental burst. Then you will have to switch back to Barbara or Cleve for Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer buff, and then lastly back to Mona for her elemental burst. The time it takes to switch in between all of these characters is going to be very close, if not longer than the 6 seconds. If you make a mistake, you're not going to be able to make that 6-second window, and you will lose out on that 20% elemental burst buff. Now, don't worry if you don't have either one of those weapons. The 4-star craftable catalyst, the Map Mare, is going to be your next best choice. For a main DPS build, there's a ton of options. Remember how I said Solar Pearl wasn't the best choice for an elemental burst build? Well, this is where Solar Pearl is going to shine. Solar Pearl is probably the best 4-star catalyst to use for a main DPS build, but if you have the 5-star books, they are going to be great choices as well. I would probably put Skyward Atlas as the best weapon here, with Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds being up there as well. If you're a player that's lazy and doesn't really like to swap characters out too often, Lost Prayers is going to be your go-to. For 4-star weapons, again, Solar Pearl is going to be the best choice. Eye of Perception is going to be a great option as well. And for those that are free to play and don't have these weapons, I would heavily recommend the craftable weapon, the Map Mare. Moving on to team comps here, the team comp that you want to use to maximize Mona's elemental burst is pretty much set in stone for now, and there's really not much you can do to change that up. For starters, if you have Bennett and Sucrose, you want to include them in it. If you don't have Sucrose, then I highly suggest running any other animal character with the Fair Disinfinity artifact set. And if you don't have Bennett, then you pretty much want to run any other Pyro character for the Vaporize elemental reaction. However, I wouldn't recommend Xianling here because her Pyro skills linger on the field after casting, and that can actually end up messing up the burst combo. So ideally, Klee, Xin Yang, Diluc, and even like Amber's charge attack would be the best because of the one-hit Pyro status debuff. And for the last spot, you're either looking at any other Catalyst character, mainly for the Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayer weapon buff. Ideally, Klee is going to be the best here just because you can gain the Elemental Resonance buff of 20% attack by having 2 Pyro characters on the field. One last thing to mention here, for the 4th spot, you can always run any other DPS character, because with the 2-piece Noblesse and the 2-piece Hydro build, Mona doesn't really do too much damage outside of her Elemental Burst. She's going to have some downtime. Now, if you're looking to build Mona on that main DPS build instead of the burst build, then you got a lot more options to play around. With the new 1.2 artifacts, we're actually seeing a lot more Hydro Cryo Perma Freeze teams, so you could run a team consisting of like Mona, Kaya, Chang'e, Xingqiu, where you just endlessly freeze your enemies to death and they don't even get a chance to touch you. If you don't want to run a freeze comp, a standard comp for Mona is typically always going to include an animal character to reduce the enemy's elemental resistance, and also of course a Pyro character for the Vaporize reactions. So I've said it before, Sucrose and Bennett are still going to be incredible here, and for that last spot it's going to be more open just because we're not really maximizing her elemental burst. So you could run a Geo character for that added survivability through the 4 elemental resonance buff. Noelle, Zhongli, Albedo would all be great choices, and for those that are complete free to play, you could do something like this: Mona, Barbara, Wind Traveler, and Xianling. I hope that this gives you a better idea on how you can run Mona as your main DPS character. If you do have any questions about team building, you can always comment in the section below, or even reach out to me through Discord, and I'll do my best to get back to you. For this last part, I'm going to break down Mona's Elemental Burst combo. And again, this combo works the best with Sucrose and Bennett. So to start, you want to either use Mona's normal hit or her right click to apply Hydro onto the enemy. Next, you're going to use Sucrose to swirl the Hydro debuff, which is going to reduce the enemy's elemental resistance to Hydro. After that, you want to swap over to Bennett for his ultimate ability. Make sure that the enemy is now applied with Pyro. If not, then you might need to use his elemental skill to ensure that it is. Next, you want to swap over to Barbara, and for those that have Klee, you use Klee, and then you swap back to Mona using her Elemental Burst. When you use Mona's Elemental Burst, that should trigger Vaporized, but there's also a neat little trick to this. You can actually proc Vaporize on the bubble explosion, but there is an internal cooldown for elemental reactions, and this is typically a couple seconds. So before we switch back over to Bennett and use his elemental skill to pop the bubble, we're going to wait a few seconds for this internal cooldown to reset, and then once we go ahead, swap over to Bennett, we can use his elemental skill to one-shot the boss. So guys, my overall thoughts on Mona is that she's an incredible character and can be a great addition to your team if you have her. I think she should ultimately be built on that 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece Hydro set just to maximize that elemental burst damage, because it is just so free to play friendly. I would only suggest building her on that 4-piece Hydro set if you have Constellation 2 unlocked for her, or if you have 5-star weapons, or if you just don't have any other main DPS characters. And lastly, for those that just want to build Mona as like a pure support, then you want to rock the full 4-piece of Noblesse Oblige, where she can empower the damage of the rest of her team even more. Thank you all for watching the video here today. Don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed the video. Again, I do have a Discord now, so if you guys want to chat with me and ask me questions, then that would be the best way to get a hold of me. The link is in the description below. Either way, Ganyu is coming out later this week. I will be streaming my Ganyu poll as well. We will be building her and testing her out in different contents. I hope to see you all there, and until then, take care and peace out.